This is Art Crush with artists Fee Marks and Paula Telizyn, where we talk about what it means to be an artist and a professional artist, ideas, thoughts, trends we're noticing, and anything else that comes to mind. Hello, Fee.
Hi, Paula. And we are back.
We
How
are back.
exciting is this that actually people were quite interested in what we had to say?
We thought Art Crush would be a one-off series one and done, and we've had so many listens, more than any of the other podcasts I've ever launched, that we are back with series two. And also, we discovered that Fee and I have a lot to say about art, being artists, and the art world in general. So,
So,
yes.
yeah, so can we really say a really big thank you to everybody who listened to series one and have been clamoring for season two? And yeah, thank you for sharing us. We're going to try and do a bit more promotion around the podcasts. But thank you for those people who have been spreading the word far and wide and actually stuck and listened to every episode.
Yeah, thank you very much. We really appreciate your time and attention. It does matter a lot because time and attention in these days is like a fleeting commodity. We don't have a lot of time, we don't have a lot of attention because the world is pulling us in many different ways. And I think it's really important for us to pause as people, not just as artists or creative, but as people to pause and think about things. And have those discussions. Like I'm lucky enough to have Fee where we meet regularly and talk about a bunch of stuff. That's how we ended up with the podcast. And she'll see something or I'll see something and we'll have this great, passionate debate about what it means or what's going on or whatever. And we have a good one for this episode. We really, really do. So did you want to tell us about what we're talking about, Fee?
Okay, today's topic is something that I know that virtually every artist has struggled with at some point in their career, if not on a regular basis, and that is pricing. Today we are going to be talking about how should we price our art?
Yeah. But to be clear, we're not telling you what numbers to use or formulas or anything like that. But there are a lot more things, more aspects to pricing than artists realize because pricing is tied up in our mindset. I just ran a free course all about mindset last week. Pricing is tied up in our mindset, it's tied up in our perceptions of value of our art, value of what we make, and it's tied up also in the perceptions that the general public has about art and artists and all of that. I don't know if you can hear it, but my cat is sneezing her face off right now. But
No, can't hear.
excellent. But I think it's really important to talk about it because every artist goes through this stage of wanting to create affordable art, of racing to the bottom with pricing. I know I went through that as well as I was figuring out how to position myself, how to do commissions and all of that. I made my prices so affordable. They only covered my physical costs, the cost of the canvas and the paints, and nothing else, just to get that practice in. But if you want to run an art business, you can't charge 30 pounds for a great big canvas.
Absolutely not. And also, you're not only self-sabotaging, you are sabotaging the whole of the art community. This is why I feel quite strongly about it. And I have to say, although people probably didn't like it, if I'm at a face-to-face event and I'm having a look around and I see somebody's art and I have a look and their prices are so ridiculously low, I will say something, not in a nasty way, but you'll tell them that they are underselling their worth, their time, and their creativity. Because I think people don't, it probably hasn't crossed other people's mind, especially if they're not surrounded by other artists and their art, that this is what they think is okay and acceptable.
Yeah. We don't really have standards too in the art world for prices either, because some people say they want to charge by the hour and then the prices become wildly astronomical. Some people want to charge by dimension or volume or whatever. And that may or may not work at the extreme ends of super large pieces, super small pieces. I was just thinking though, like plumbers and electricians, my favorite sort of thing to compare art to, the trades don't have these issues, right? There's set prices you charge. It costs 600 pounds to put a toilet in, for example. I have no idea. But it's like they have set things. You can call up six different plumbers and they'll give you a price within this, 10 or 20 pounds of what everybody else has set. And if somebody is super cheap, you know that they've probably stolen the toilet or or don't
Exactly.
understand.
Do
Yeah.
you always go for the cheapest quote? That's the other thing.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people, me included, often go for the mid quote,
Yeah.
but also as well as looking at what at value for money.
I think
I
so.
mean,
Yeah. Mhm.
I was just going to say, and it happens all the way through your career. Did an exhibition this year, and I was basically told that the people who came in, they're not going to spend more than £300 on a painting, and that's why I wasn't selling. My attitude is this is the wrong place. It's not that my prices are wrong, it's that I'm showing in the wrong places. That doesn't mean that that's not a challenge, because we can talk about that another time about different stages of your career and the challenges that you face. But me, as a sort of like midpoint artist or whatever, I can't keep going to the same venues if that's their attitude.
Yeah, exactly. I did notice this when I was going around in my own art business doing the various shows, that there were certain shows that were definitely not for me. And because I'd been in business for years and years beforehand in other businesses, I recognized that it wasn't my pricing was off, my location was off. Right. And that's an important thing to remember, that you can't keep doing the same shows over and over again once you grow as an artist, once your prices rise and everything else, because your market just isn't there. Shows are geared towards certain groups. So, like if you're doing sort of crafty artisan shows, Fee and I both hate that word artisan because it's a cop out. But if you're going to those kind of shows where they're selling crocheted blankets and I don't know, handmade mugs and little ornaments and tchotchkes and whatever, your art doesn't belong there. If you are making fine art, if you're painting, if you're doing sculpture, if you're doing more complicated things, it's also important to factor into pricing, aside from where you're showing your art, is are you factoring in your marketing? Are you factoring in your education? So a lot of artists stop and say, like, I've learned my craft, I'll keep practicing and I'll get better and better, but they don't think about the other education that you need. Do you understand bookkeeping? Are you familiar with how to run a business? Have you taken marketing courses? All of those factor into the costs that must be paid back through selling your art. And so if you are charging, and we're going to take this example of 30 pounds for a large painting, you are not even making back the costs of the canvas and the paints, much less your time, much less your marketing, much less your website costs and everything else. You're just not making it back. And so it's really important to factor in the invisible costs. If you have a studio that's outside of your home, you've got costs around that too. I used to have a studio outside of my home. It cost me $814 a month, plus electrical, plus internet costs as well, and water. So it ended up being about $1,000 a month to have that studio outside of my house. And then the cost for me to drive there and back as well. So there's a lot of costs that you have to factor into the pricing of your art. And I know, Fee, you have a studio outside of your house as
I
well.
do.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So that is something that I have to think about as well. It's a very, very good point. And yeah, I just think it's almost like that people don't understand the value of art. They know about Sotheby's. They know about famous paintings, being sold for millions and millions of pounds or dollars or whatever. But then there's like this gap between what is perceived as like, we'll go back to what we've talked about before, but the sort of like establishment have decided is like the pinnacle of artness, if that's a word. And then there's like local artists. There's like hardly anything in between.
Yeah.
And that's why. And then as soon as you have that label, a local artist, it's like, oh, well, you shouldn't sell your art for very much.
Yeah. Appeal to the local market.
Yeah.
Yeah. I know I hit that with my studio when my studio had a gallery attached to it. And when the local people walked in and saw my $600 Canadian paintings, it was the attitude was, I would never pay that for art kind of thing. Now, I lived in a little village and they were a tiny bit inbred. And I don't mind saying that because I don't like that community. But yeah, they did not appreciate. And had I based my prices on selling to them, I would have had to go at least half, if not a quarter, of my pricing, and it wouldn't have covered my costs, my overhead, or anything, because some bumpkin decided that they didn't want to pay for art. You know, when people come up and say, I don't want to pay good prices for custom made work, direct them to IKEA so they can buy a couch painting print and don't worry about it because they are not your customer. They're not your customer.
And I think what you've just said is a really, really good point, Paula, because I had such a weird experience in my art business journey because it took off during COVID and I started selling internationally before I'd even ever been to a local art show or anything like that. To me, it was almost going local almost was a detriment because I was selling my work for the prices. My prices were gradually increasing as well because I had that market. I knew that international market. But when I started doing local shows, it was like my artwork was sort of like the most expensive in the show. I had comments made about it. And also, suddenly it was like people weren't expecting those prices. So they didn't necessarily buy, even though I was selling really well with my own marketing and internationally. Whereas a lot of people start off locally and then, well, often they're too scared to even go international. But then the idea is that you progress. But that was really marked for me, and it's still something that I would say, quite honestly, I'm still struggling with.
Yeah, I mean, you did do it backwards, but it's not like you had a choice because it's not like there were markets or anything locally. So we just bumped you up as fast as we could to international. It's such a strange thing because it's almost like the local markets are kind of like a nest or an incubator where you can test things out. You can your neighbors will buy from you just because they like you kind of thing. And then you leave the nest and go international. And selling international is not a big deal, right? Everybody makes it such a big deal. It's not. People still pay for work. You ship it. You just put a different customs label on it. Whoop-de-doo. There's nothing extra involved. If you've already shipped your art within your own country, shipping it internationally is not a big deal. But yeah, you hit that local barrier backwards.
Yeah. As I said, it was really odd. And I do know other artists who were in a similar position have gone through exactly the same. And yes, we know that the market fluctuates and changes and this, that, and the other. And it is much more difficult now to sell internationally. Not impossible. I'm not saying not impossible, but because of politically what's going on in the world. However, why, the idea is that your art or anything is only as valuable as what somebody would pay for it, which is true. But then you don't want to drop your prices because people aren't prepared to pay more than £300 or $300 for a painting.
Well, we do know because I've taught this, but we do know that price really doesn't make all the difference. If your work is, let's say, 500 pounds or whatever, and you drop it to 300 on a sale, generally it still won't sell if it's not
Mm.
positioned correctly or if it's not in front of the right market. Because price is only one factor. Now, if you priced your work, let's say you just started, so it's your first 6 months as an artist, and you've priced your work at 5,000 pounds a painting. nobody's going to buy it. Your pricing is a problem, right? It's too expensive. The same way that if you just start out and you price your work at 20 pounds a painting, it's too low. You're not covering your costs at all. There's that happy medium. But when you are in the middle, so let's say you are a couple of years in and your artwork is selling for, I don't know, 300 to 900 pounds a piece and all that, putting things on sale generally doesn't make a difference.
Oh,
Unless,
it's never worked for me.
yeah,
Even though we've had this conversation, you still think, well, maybe I will. I'll do a special offer. I'll do this, that, and the other. And it never, ever makes a jot of difference. The only thing that made a difference to me was when I took my art of chance, my wheel of fortune to an art show. And I was talking to someone else about this, and it's I think why that made a difference was because people wanted to have a go. Basically, to explain, it was like a wheel of fortune. Somebody who was interested in painting would spin it and you'd land on 20% off or something like that. So they then got that money off the painting. That is the only time I've had success with reducing my cost. And I think it was more to do with A, novelty, and B, the fun of it, that it was a bit of fun and nobody else was doing that.
yeah, it was an experience when somebody was purchasing from you. They had a laugh, they had a little gamble, and then
Mm.
they got a piece that they loved. When I've put my pieces historically on sale, I've only done it for studio moves. And I moved studios, well, lots of times, but three times that were significant. And in order to move to my commercial space, I had to do a sale. So I did a big moving sale. And then to leave my commercial space, I had to do a big moving sale because I was very prolific. And in those sales, because they were attached to a very specific reason and a very real deadline, like buy this piece at this price by this time, or, it's not going to be available, they worked really, really well. But when I have tried to do sales like you've tried, they don't work because they're random. We're not corporations, right? We're not stores that have Black Friday or whatever. We are people creating custom work using skills and using really good quality mediums depending on your budget. So it's important to understand that we don't need to do sales. They don't work typically unless there's a reason to go with them. And they devalue your work because then what if people wait every year to the annual studio sale or whatever? So the rest of the year you're not selling or yeah, like it's just
Yeah, I think we're going straight back to self-sabotage, devaluing what you do. You know what your work is worth. And if you really think it's only worth £30, I would say you need to question what are you doing?
yeah.
Have you not got better things to do than sit in the cold and try and flog paintings for 30 quid? Because you're not going to be making any money. So that can't be a motivator. What is your motivator?
Yeah.
It's like when people say, "Oh, I'm not really interested in selling my work." I would almost give it away. I just want to, it's like it's absolutely BS, isn't it?
It is. There's a lot of
And
deconstruction.
it's fear.
Yeah, it's fear, but there's also deconstruction that we all need to do about our internalized attitudes towards art and artists, right? So we are in a world right now, unfortunately, that does not value art or artists. And when we're called to make art, when we have the gifts and the drive and the desire to make it, so I'm not talking about, oh, a heavenly call. I'm just talking about like we have the gifts, drive, and
Mm.
desire. We still have those attitudes. Art is frivolous. What I'm making, people can live without. Why would somebody spend money on it? I wouldn't. Like we all have these attitudes around it, and it shows up in our pricing. And it shows up in how we position ourselves so that it leaves us open to have our prices haggled with, which sucks. I wouldn't give you 600 pounds for that, but I'll give you 100 pounds and a slightly eaten hot dog. Like, no, like you leave yourself vulnerable to that until you're comfortable with the value of your art and the value of or what difference art makes in somebody's life. You can't price appropriately. Like everybody's asking for formulas and how do I do this and how do I do that. All of that is irrelevant. Those are details. What's really important is how do you feel about your art? How do you feel about art in general? How do you feel about people who have money to buy art? right? Those are the questions you should be asking and deconstructing those answers from, because it's really important in order to understand why you would put yourself at 30 pounds for a large painting. And I saw the same thing a couple of years ago. And I think she made it into my book, but unnamed. There was a woman on Facebook who was selling her art for $25 for a painting, but she wasn't even selling the art. She was begging. So she'd take crappy photos of her work, and then she'd be like, "My kid's birthday's on Tuesday. Please buy my painting for 25."
Oh, playing the
Yeah, or he won't have a
desperation card.
cake.
Why?
Yeah.
If somebody if somebody said that to me about anything, like take art out the equation, it is actually begging,
Yeah.
and it just makes people feel so uncomfortable. And, well, I think both of us, I never understand anybody on social media who plays the pity card ever, because it's like, why do you think people, you almost like that they almost like want support and they're not getting the support. People are like, what?
Yeah.
It's like nobody knows. Now, you know, and I know, Paula, that we all have problems in our lives. We all have issues. But part of my marketing is I don't share all that stuff on social media, because that's not going to make people want to buy my art. And social media is my marketing tool.
Yeah, exactly. Do you want your art that you've worked hard to create, whatever it is, you've had some level of education, you've definitely put time in and passion and spent money on the materials. Do you want somebody to buy it because they're absolutely fucking in love with it, pardon my French, or do you want somebody to buy it because poor you, and it's going to end up at a Goodwill or charity shop on sale for whatever, which also devalues your work because they didn't buy it because they loved it. They didn't buy it because they connected with it. They bought it because it was a pity party for you, poor person whose kid needs a birthday party or whose dog needs shoes or whatever. Like, again, it comes down to mindset. How do you want people to view yourself? How do you view yourself? And how do you view your art? That's the core of pricing, and it is consistent. And I've taught this again and again and again to students over the years that it's all of the rest of it. It's just details.
Absolutely. And also, I think a good starting point is, what do you value? What would you spend quite a lot of money on because you value it so much? Now, this just popped into my head, that there's a shop that has a TikTok account where they sell Birkins and Kelly bags. Okay, they sell the top of the range bags because Hermes won't, you can't just go in and buy one of these bags at Hermes. You have to go on a list. There's a whole game you have to play. Da 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 da. So what they've done is they buy the bags and they sell them at a much higher point than Hermes does, and suddenly, because they become, people are like, they go in all the time and buy these bags, because what they've done very cleverly, they don't talk about the price being more, but it's like, we've got the goods. If you want the color, the size that you want, we've got it. And people would just go and pay it, because it's like, oh, yeah, you don't even think about it. They don't go, oh no, why would I buy that? I'm going to go and get it from Hermes. And again, it's their marketing and the value. And suddenly you watch enough of their TikToks and you begin to think, oh, that's really reasonable. That bag is only £25,000.
Yeah.
It's crazy, but it's drip, drip, drip. And if more artists did that, because it is about supporting each other in the artist community. If we were all singing from the same hymn book and going, we're not going to sell our work for this piffling amount that isn't even going to pay for my grocery bill. This is something that I've spent weeks doing. I've done this, that, and the other. Then it wouldn't be so much of a problem. And I also wonder if it does, for a lot of artists, maybe they just don't have that support around them. I was lucky when I was starting my business, I worked with you. Having a mentor really, really, really helped me, because otherwise I wouldn't have had a clue. I could have ended up being one of those people at an artisan market selling my paintings for 30 quid because I wouldn't have known. But again, it's about investing in yourself and your business and your self-worth.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. I remember I was at a show, and you've heard the story a few years back because a lot of my art was pop culture. I did a lot of Comic Cons and stuff. And I had somebody come up to my painting, which was discounted to $400, fully framed and everything else. And they looked at it and they're like, I would never pay $400 for that, maybe $80, whatever. The frame was $80, so come on. Anyway, they walked three booths over and bought a $400 custom-made lightsaber. Had no problem with it, right? It's what they value. So, yeah, yeah. And it's really important to understand this is where we get back to putting your work in front of the people who will see it as valuable and understanding that your own art has value. I would never be able to sell an original painting to Lightsaber Boy because he was, he valued lightsabers over art, even though
He's not your client.
exactly,
He's
exactly.
not your client, and that's okay.
Yeah,
We're not
yeah,
interested in his opinion of, oh, I would pay you, who cares? You're irrelevant.
yeah.
You are not my client.
Exactly. So people who have the money and don't value your art are not your client either, right?
Mm.
It's just, like just think about, like I said, Fee had said about what you find valuable. People will spend on Hermes bags and all of that. And it's because they value it. You have to teach your audience to value your art, find the audiences that already are predisposed to valuing your art, and then price it appropriately. Absolutely price it appropriately. I think I want to wind this episode up because we should just bring it to an end before we repeat ourselves. But I want to talk about Labubus. And I know, but I want to talk about why they've taken off and why everybody wants one because everything around us, the fads are worth dissecting in order to see where the marketing is. If they sold the Labubus or Lafufus or all of the, I'm sorry, I'm on unboxing TikTok and it's just really amusing to me.
Well,
And
once you get on,
yeah, once I get on it, I can't get off. But anyway, I've been watching the whole process, and the reason they've taken off is because they've been positioned as desirable as they improve people's lives through giving them something to have fun with. They're super cute and all of that. If they had positioned these little ugly things to be buy it because I need to buy a birthday cake for my son or buy it because I'm poor, it wouldn't have taken off. They position these Labubus to be desirable, to be, you're somebody if you have it. There's a lot of fun and playfulness around it because they're blind boxed as well. So much like your Wheel of Fortune spinning sale thing, there's a playful amount, energy around it, a playful experience around it. People love to pop the tops and rip the whatever they're called, the little cardboard strings to open the box and tear the bag and blah blah blah. Labubus are a perfect example of how you should be thinking about your art. Is the experience around it something that somebody would enjoy? So purchasing it, having it in their homes or businesses, do they enjoy that experience of interacting with you, of picking out the pieces, of having them? Do they desire them? Is there playfulness or fun or something around it? Because the minute you position yourself, buy my art, 'cause I'm a starving artist, support me, poor me, help me make rent this month or whatever. I mean, those are real issues. And I'm not mocking them because I have been there more than people realize. But it's the positioning that invites multiple purchases in and invites your business to grow. And again, it is mindset. So when we talk about pricing, when we talk about positioning, when we talk about showing up at the right shows, it all comes down to have you deconstructed your attitudes towards yourself and your art? And until you do that, you won't be able to price appropriately and you won't be able to make a living.
Also, just on the Labubu front, before we just finish, because there's another thing that they did that was very, very clever.
Mhm.
They made it quite difficult to purchase. So
Oh,
people
yeah.
were like rushing to stores to try and find them. It was like a big thing. Also, they didn't just market, it could have easily been just a kid's thing. They did not market it as a kid's toy. They marketed it as an accessory. And that was the clever bit, I thought, because they made it of people for any age,
Yeah.
and even people who went, "Oh my God, I don't get it." Once you understood it, even me, because I said to you, I was like a bit, "Oh, I don't really understand it." And then when I heard that it was based on Maurice Sendak's Where the Wild Things Are, one of my favorite children's books, suddenly I thought, "Oh, I'd quite like one." So they just they've managed to reach such a huge audience.
Yeah, yeah. Scarcity is a huge one, but understanding the value of your art and understanding putting yourself in front of the right audience and making the audience want your work is the secret to selling more than pricing is. So, yeah. And I think this wraps up episode 1 of series 2 of Art Crush. Thank you so much for listening, and thank you, Fee, for your insights as always as a mid-career artist, actively working and selling your art internationally. Like that's really fantastic. As I get ready to relaunch my own art career, this has been really exciting to have these chats. So get ready to listen to episodes 2 through 6 or 7, depending on how many we record, and subscribe to our podcast here on Spotify or wherever good podcasts are available. We will see you next time.